Hey, how's it going, everybody? If this is your first time stopping by, I appreciate it. Please consider subscribing to the channel and hit that little bell so you get all the new videos that we have coming out. I wanted to take a few minutes in this extremely charged political environment to see what I could do or at least give my thoughts on how maybe we can come together with as polarized as we are. Now, I think you'd be surprised that both the left and the right really want the exact same thing. They both want freedom. And the reason why we're so polarized right now is both sides, for probably like stronger than it's ever been in my lifetime, both sides feel that the other side is a threat to their freedom. Does that make sense to everybody? The left feels the right is a threat to their freedom, and the right feels the left is a threat to their freedom. So we actually want the same thing and believe the same thing. It's a bit of a surprise. We are really after the same thing. However, our motivating factors are very, very different. The right typically, and not everybody, this isn't about any one individual. There's no group is a monolith. But I'm going to give a generalization. And again, these are just my opinions. But the right in general is mostly motivated by religion and capitalism. Those are their main guiding principles. On the left, I would say the main guiding principles of the left are equality and social investment. And that would be the agenda on the left. So you can see, even though they both are interested in freedom, their ideas of what freedom is fundamentally different. Now, it's been this way for a very long time. So what we're going to do is take a little bit of a deep dive into some of the most charged concepts of the day and figure out how each side is different and what those differences mean to each side. Now, I am left-leaning, so I'm going to do my best to keep this my opinion, but not opinionated. I think we can all agree that both sides feel the other side is infringing upon their freedoms. So let's take a look at the hopes and fears, which are typically the driving force of people's motivation. They're motivated by the opportunity for gain, hope, or the fear of loss. So on the right, what are they hopeful for? Well, as you saw with Trump, what they're hopeful for is the good old days. Now, whatever that means to you is the good old days, is when America was great. And what the fear that the right has is that there's restrictions being put against them from the right, and that they are under attack, that their constitutional rights are under attack, their Second Amendment rights are under attack, their right to free speech, their religious freedom, the status quo for them is being challenged. And that makes them feel that they are under attack and that they are the victim of what's going on in today's world. That there is violence going on out there, and they are afraid that socialism is going to increase the violence, and there'll be cities burning and there'll be mayhem, and their way of life will be over. Now, on the left, typically people hope for a better future, some improvement upon the past and the current day. And they fear that the right is trying to restrict the progress that they're trying to make. And on the left, it feels like they are under attack. So as you see, both sides, again, feel they're under attack. Now, what does the left feel they're under attack? They feel women's rights are under attack, LGBTQ rights, equality and diversity, inclusion, their First Amendment rights are under attack, especially when it comes to education and being free to be who you are. Civil rights, feel that it's increasing discrimination, and they're afraid of the violence. You know, there's a picture of people on the right carrying guns and loving guns and coming out to events with guns so that any sort of confrontation that goes on, it's not just confrontation, it's violence, it's gun violence. And they're afraid of what the right would possibly bring fascism, and that would end the way of life for the left. This attack that both sides feel they're under, I think that's what we could call the culture war. And one place where this culture war rages and is extremely divisive is in our education system. Now, would you be surprised to know that both sides believe that schools are indoctrinating children? It's not just one side or the other. Both sides believe that schools are indoctrinating children. Now, people on the right typically believe that children are being indoctrinated to be woke, and with things like CRT, which we'll get into in a little bit. And on the left, they feel that things are being whitewashed and that the First Amendment is being stifled because you can't discuss other ideas of what actually happened in the past. So it's an indoctrination, but again, both sides have a completely different idea of what that indoctrination is. Now, it's important when we have a discussion like this that we understand what words mean. Now, we're in a time where definitions don't mean anything anymore. And I really don't mean we can't agree what a word means. I mean, a definition literally is just thrown out. And people seem to think they can use whatever they want as a definition for a word. So that's part of what the culture war is. To understand, it's not just a war of ideas. It's a war of meaning of ideas. So let's take a look at woke, for example. Now, on the right, woke is, for the most part, a negative term. It refers to concepts or having to accept things that they don't like. And I think it's important for the left to realize when the right feels that something is woke and they're being forced to accept an idea they don't agree with. For example, the right has a really hard time accepting trans and trans rights. And to force them to accept gender identity over their traditional ideas, to them, makes them oppressed. So to explain that again, forcing them to accept an idea that they don't agree with makes them feel oppressed. I know you may not agree. It doesn't matter. This is how the feelings are. So it's important that we understand each other, not judge each other. So on the right, this idea that systemic inequality is actually a problem. This is something that they may not agree with. And forcing them to agree with it, no matter what you tell them, is oppressing their freedom. It's an attack on their constitutional right to say what they want. When you hear the right refer to the corporate bending to the woke mob, what they think is going on is they think corporations are being controlled to accept alternative lifestyles. And even though one of their major motivating principles is capitalism, and often it's capitalism that drives those decisions, they're looking to make money. They do things because they think it's going to make them more money, not lose them money. So even though it may feel they're bending to a woke mob, they're actually probably just abiding by the principle of capitalism. And this is a problem where Republicans may have an issue because they believe in capitalism, but sometimes capitalism goes against their ideals. And so it's better to explain it as a conspiracy than it is what they want is going against what they want. I hope that made sense. Now, on the left, oh, I missed one. That's also where this war on Christmas comes from. The idea of being woke and saying happy holidays is just an attack on them being able to say Merry Christmas. So when somebody says Merry Christmas because they want to say Merry Christmas and you correct them and say happy holidays, well, you're infringing upon their First Amendment right and you're threatening their religious rights. So you can see all of these things make them feel oppressed. Now, on the left, what woke means on the left is a realization of a systemic inequality that they didn't realize existed. So a disparagement between how blacks are treated in the justice system. That's a proven stat that when you realize, oh wait, it's not just complaining or they show it on the news. There's actual mass data to back up that it is a systemic inequality. And realizing that and realizing being white means I am less likely to have to deal with something that they have to deal with or that a person of color has to deal with. And it doesn't mean I'm going to give up being white. It doesn't mean I'm going to have to give up anything that I have. It just means I'm recognizing that things aren't equal. Now that's what the left means by woke. Imagine if we had a uniform definition for woke, we could actually have a conversation. But since one side feels everything woke is an attack on them and they're being oppressed, and the other side sees being woke as realizing that people are being oppressed, it's almost impossible to have a conversation without agreeing to terms of what that word's going to mean. I don't know if that made sense. Agreeing to what a term means. So an explanation of how, even though both sides feel there's an indoctrination, the idea of what's being indoctrinated is completely different. Now, let's take a look at CRT. Critical race theory, often referred to as CRT, is a fairly new part of the culture war as far as the term CRT. But in reality, this is really just a continuation of the ongoing civil rights battle. So on the left, the way CRT is viewed is, well, first of all, nobody had ever heard of it. Nobody had ever heard of CRT, which is a good example of how great the right is at generating emotion about different concepts. Because the left had no idea. Like, I had never heard of what CRT was. Now, I knew about the concepts that I guess are taught in CRT, but I never knew CRT as a term or really in depth that it was a learning concept or a theory. Now, when the left refers to CRT, what they're talking about is a theory or the study of how the different institutions and laws throughout the history of America were actually developed and enacted that systemically disadvantage different people. It's more of an academic theory, not a practice or a teaching. It doesn't have a methodology or an agenda. It's really a system of questioning how things are and seeing if there's ways to make them better. Now, on the left, on the right, it's completely different. They think that CRT is an attack on whiteness, that it teaches white children to hate themselves because they are supposedly being taught that by being white, you are inherently bad. Now, on the left, they see if you're going to say CRT is taught in schools, what the left thinks that means or interprets that to mean is that a true and accurate depiction of history is being taught. Now, growing up, I was taught Columbus was the greatest, that slavery was bad, but some of it was good, and we freed the slaves, and then civil rights happened, and things are much better now. That's not the true and accurate history. I was never taught about Juneteenth. I was never taught about the Tulsa Massacre. I was never taught about how bad Columbus was or how truly disgusting the slaves were treated. It was all whitewashed. And that's what the left interprets. If CRT is being taught in school, that's what's being taught. Now, again, on the right, the outrage is they're being taught that society is inherently racist and that if you're white, you should inherently know that you're bad. And if you're a person of color, know that the system is against you and it's okay if you don't make it. Now, I don't believe that's what is really being taught, but that's what is believed on the right. They believe that segregation is being promoted by dividing us based on our past. So the right thinks it is extremely racist and it's an attack, and this needs to be stopped, and that any teaching of equality or anything that might make white people feel guilty about the way they were treated in the past, then it needs to be removed from the schools. And this petrifies the left, because this is just another attack on civil rights to them, another attack on the First Amendment, that we can't teach accurate history because it might be offensive to some people. This is why this is such a big deal for everybody, and why it's called a culture war, because what each of these different cultures believe is happening is dramatically different, and they both feel threatened. And until we understand each other's differences, we can't come together. And if we can't come together, violence and separation is what happens. So let's take a look at constitutional rights. Both the left and the right feel that the other side is trying to strip them of their constitutional rights. And we're going to take a look at this in a couple ways. First, let's take a look at LGBTQ rights. Now, on the left, they feel that this is a civil right, and that their civil rights to be who they want to be should be respected. Now, they believe it's a civil right because by law, it is a civil right. Your gender identity is a protected class. You cannot discriminate against people based on their gender. And the left feels that this is under attack. And they just want to be free to be who they want to be without being attacked verbally and without being discriminated against, without having less rights as a human that other people have. And an example of this is the trans ban that was put on for women, or for trans people in the military. This is easily, it's a no-brainer. That is a violation of their civil rights. They're human beings. What right does anybody have to discriminate against them because of their sexual identity, their gender identity? It's illogical, and it is an attack on them. And they feel that this amount of inequality and attack leads to violence, which is true by data. You can see the level of attacks on trans far surpasses any group that's out there. It's really horrifying. Now, on the right, they're under a different sort of attack. Now, LGBTQ goes really, really, really contrary to how the religious right sees the way the world should be. It's an attack on traditional family values. It's an attack on a man and a woman is what makes a marriage. It's an attack on what they see is the way life is supposed to be lived. And if you force them to accept other people's gender identity, then you are attacking them. You are oppressing them. You are forcing them to abandon their beliefs to accept your civil rights. Now, I want to break that down. The right feels oppressed by having to accept the civil rights of other people because they have in their mind a civil right to say what they want to say and believe what they want to believe. And God has given them that right also. And if you take that away, you're attacking their religion, a war on their religion. So the civil rights to the left is an attack on the right. And the religious rights of the right is an attack of the civil rights on the left. This is a powder keg. Try to tell somebody they don't have a right to their religion, and try to tell somebody they don't have a right to their rights. How do we resolve this? Well, again, the first step is at least understanding the other person's position. Next, let's take a look at our constitutional health rights. When it comes to the differences between health rights, between the left and the right, this one is just, this is the best I can give you as far as a breakdown. But we're going to look at two different rights that are heavily contested at the moment in today's society. And they're both controversial. I'm sorry if any of this upsets you. And these are simplifications of these things because they're long discussions that can't be had here. So I'm going to simplify them a little bit, or a lot bit. So, number one, abortion. On the right, typical stance on abortion is pro-life. This most often comes from a religious morality, an idea that every heartbeat is a life and that every heartbeat has a right to life, a right to be born. And because that heartbeat can't speak for itself, then they have decided they need to speak for it and that life needs to be born. That, excuse it, but all lives matter. And this is the major contention for the pro-life stance, that a woman has an obligation to give birth to any heartbeat that is created inside its body. Now, on the left, it's very different. And it's more of a civil rights and a woman's right and woman's body autonomy issue. Now, it is currently settled law, and that's a lot of the reason why the courts are so important, because it's never been a legislative law. And a lot of that has to do with the religious influence on our legal system and our lawmaking. But on the left, like I said, this is about the mother's rights and not the rights of a heartbeat. And sometimes the woman is a victim of rape or incest or of circumstances beyond their control. And for them to be required to do two things, I think it's important to understand two different ideas of just pregnancy and birth. Not even getting into whether there needs to be systems and what happens to the baby once it's born, but just simply when it comes to the mother. One, you are requiring a mother to put their health at risk. You are requiring them to live a specific lifestyle for the 9 months that it takes, and to go through all the health challenges, to go through the possible work challenges, to possibly have to give up a job, that the woman is obligated and has no right to choose whether they want to have the health process of carrying a fetus. The second, and what is never discussed, ever, is the economics of forcing a woman to carry to term. Now, even the argument of you can give the baby up for adoption. So that's why I'm not covering post-birth. But who's covering the doctor visits? Who's covering the food, the nutrition? Who's covering the vitamins? Who's covering all of the things that are necessary? And who's covering the expensive birth? If we're not going to obligate both people that created that heartbeat, what right do we have to obligate a woman to the physical and financial burden of a process that he or she may not want to do? I think the left and the right have a very, very, very different reason for why they believe in what they believe. And again, they both feel attacked. They feel attacked that on the right, you're violating their religious freedom again. You can see there's a bit of a theme there. You're violating their religious freedom by forcing them to accept abortion. That is oppressing them by not letting them practice their religion. Again, their religion is being challenged. And so therefore they feel their rights are being challenged and they're being oppressed. On the left, you're taking away a woman's civil rights and her freedom for her own body. That seems like oppression. So both sides feel they're being oppressed. Now, the second one I wanted to talk about is masks. This is another highly contentious issue in today's world. On the left, they are for mask mandates. They don't have a problem with telling people what to do with their health in this way, with putting a mask on. And the justification is we're in the middle of a pandemic. The scientific consensus is that masks help deter the spread of the virus by stopping any viral load from symptomatic or asymptomatic people, specifically asymptomatic people that don't know they have it. So the left is for the mask mandate because they feel it's a public health benefit. It benefits society as a whole. Now, on the right, they feel this is an attack on their civil rights, on their constitutional rights, that forcing them to wear a mask when they don't want to wear a mask and don't believe in the scientific consensus, they believe in other science that they've read or other science they've been told. So by forcing them to wear a mask, you are oppressing them. You are making them do something they don't want to do. You are taking away their freedom of choice. You're taking away their body autonomy. The right feels attacked. This is part of the culture war. That making them do something that they don't want to do is taking away their rights. On the left, they feel that that is a right worth taking away. Often on the left, they don't want to admit it, but they feel that it is okay to mandate masks and to take away people's freedom of choice because they feel it benefits society. I think this is an important part to end on. You can see that everybody feels attacked. Everybody feels that their right to the way of life that they want is under attack. And the reality is that feeling of being under attacked is what's pushing us further and further and farther and further and farther apart. I mean that both ways. That physically we are actually getting farther apart, and fundamentally we are getting further apart. That the feeling of being attacked makes us more protective, makes us almost more radical, makes us push harder to the edges. And that is dangerous and doesn't end good. No matter which side wins, if one side is the winner, America is the loser. Again, if one side is the winner, America is the loser. So I know you feel your side is the righteous side, is the correct side. But if you win, you become too powerful. If the left wins and gets rid of all of opposing opinion, that's not good. There's no check and balance to that. If the right takes hold and we limit education and we limit women's rights and we limit LGBTQ rights, then we're taking our social justice movement that we've made so much progress in since, say, 1965, then we're losing. It's terrible for America. So this is the only way we're going to ever resolve without one side losing. It's important to understand what each other believes, and now we can have a legitimate conversation about how we address those beliefs. Thanks for taking the time to listen. I really appreciate it. Please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that bell so you get all the new stuff. Like the video, share it, and I hope you guys have a great day.